what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Hello, and welcome to the Caregiver Community. This is a place where we talk about the joys and the challenges of caring for our aging parents and for ourselves. I am Frances Hall, co-founder and executive director of ACAPcommunity, and I'm here with my co-host for this podcast, Beth Brandes, a consultant and retired social services administrator. Hi, Beth. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. Beth and I are two of the estimated 10 million adults in the United States and many more millions worldwide who are adult children caring for aging parents and for ourselves, or we have been in that role in the recent past. In this podcast, we're talking about when mom and dad leave home, when they make the decision to move from the home they may have lived in for many years. What should they and we as their adult children know? What are the first steps in getting ready for such a monumental move? And how can we as their adult children best help them at this pivotal time? Our guest today is Bridget Donnelly. Bridget founded Donnelly's Estate Liquidation and Appraisal Services in 2007, specifically to serve the needs of older adults in transition. She and her husband and business partner, Bill Gardner, help others downsize, cope with the stresses of moving, and shed unwanted possessions. Bridget comes honestly by her passion of helping others deal with their stuff. As the daughter of antique dealers, Bridget tolerated an endless stream of treasures coursing through her home, which was downsized regularly to accommodate new finds. Her family moved frequently but unconventionally, she said, carload by carload. That would be quite a task. Bridget is a Penn State graduate, Pennsylvania State University, with a BS in marketing. She has certifications as a personal property appraiser, senior move manager, and estate liquidator. Previously, Bridget was in corporate marketing, advertising, and strategic planning, and she and Bill live in State College, Pennsylvania. Bridget, welcome to the Caregiver Community. We are delighted to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Bridget, let's start this morning by talking about some of the things that can help aging parents and their loved ones understand about senior transitions.
Sure. I want to preface my remarks, though, with stating that I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a gerontologist, I'm not a social worker. We've helped hundreds of older adults and their families with transitions, and we found a lot of things work, but we basically have to remember that we're dealing here with individuals, and what works for one situation is not necessarily guaranteed to work with another. So keep that in mind as I share with you. To answer your question about, what can help us with senior transition, what helps to understand, the first thing is that there is typically a tremendous amount of stress happening and being experienced by everyone involved in the situation. This is really a time of loss, often marked by physical loss that necessitates the move, loss of capabilities. There's the idea of you're losing your house, you're losing what you've experienced, your community. Now you're getting ready to lose your stuff. You're losing your independence. So it's really important to be empathetic to that whole notion of loss. Another important thing to understand and keep in mind is that these transitions are typically extremely exhausting and difficult for everybody, but particularly for the older adult, mentally, emotionally, physically, and logistically. If you think about that, oftentimes people who are living in their home while it's being listed for sale, and that's hard to keep it perfect to keep the realtors happy. Sometimes people are moving from one part of the country to another to be near family, and just picking up and moving to a whole different place is extremely stressful. Their change, their routine is being changed because of all that's involved in the move, and they're being uprooted from what they maybe have been invested in for decades. So that's all really important to remember as you're facing and talking through and considering, how to best handle this move, this transition.
Absolutely, and that's a lot for anybody to deal with.
Yeah, particularly, I mean, if your physical health is compromised and you're in pain and, a great part of your day is spent, just getting yourself up and moving. Not everybody's in that situation, but it's a whole lot to add to what you're already coping with as an older adult. So those are all really important points to be empathetic to. One of the things that we've found that really helps is if the adult children can start the conversation with their parents to get them moving while the adult parents can still participate. We have had so many situations where it's a mess because the decision was made too late. Mm-hmm. And that just, basically puts everybody into a reactive situation rather than a proactive. And all that does is just compound the feelings of stress, and I'm a victim of my circumstances, and it's just far better to start talking about this and planning for this. We had a couple recently who were planning to move to a retirement community, has severe mobility issues, and we began the process of talking about what's going to happen and the need to start to think about what they were taking with them. And the woman threw her hands up and said, "You know what, I've been here 58 years. I'm not going to get this done this year. It's too much. I'm not doing it."
Yeah.
And she just pulled the plug on the whole move because she just knew physically she wasn't going to get through it. She had waited too long.
Bridget, I found that a couple of interesting, unique features, particularly for parents that had grown up during the Depression who had collected everything and saved everything. It felt very assaultive to them as they were having to shed and move many of those items. Have you seen that as well?
You said they felt very insulted?
Assaulted.
Well, they're having to make a ton of decisions. I mean, hundreds and thousands of decisions about what to do with what's in their house, whether they're going to take it, whether they're not going to take it. And I use the analogy of, it feels like chickens pecking at you. There are just so many decisions to make, and they're having to do this at a time when that's not really what they have the energy for. So yes, they feel assaulted. They feel that things are being pulled away from them, or their arms are being twisted, and it can get really contentious. So it's a delicate act. It's a delicate line to walk, and I have some suggestions for how to start the process, when we're ready to talk about that.
Well, I think that's a good segue. Even what you have said so far, I'm remembering back to when my mother made the decision to move and how difficult that was, because it was, so although she had been thinking about it for a while, there were no plans in action until all of a sudden. So yes, let's talk about what would you suggest as good ways to start the process of getting mom and dad ready to move?
Well, one thing that I think is essential is, and it's far easier to say this than to make it happen, but to start with the right attitude and to assume, I call it assuming the sale, which means this is going to happen. Uh-huh. There can be a tremendous amount of waffling and second guessing, and then the inevitable talking about it till it's dead. And talking is a great delay tactic. I had a situation with a woman. She had 5 daughters. She lived on her own. Her husband had passed. All the daughters lived all over the country. And this woman knew the best place for her to move to was a continuing care retirement community, but all 5 of her daughters were questioning her decision.
Oh, wow.
And this woman ended up in such a state of stress and confusion and started second-guessing everything she decided. And they undid all the mental work that the older adult had put into this process. It was extremely unfortunate because of their not having the right attitude and supporting their mother in her decision. So she had made the decision to move ahead, and I think that as an adult child, you need to support that and encourage it with a positive attitude. That's the first step. The other thing that we try to do is to really kind of look forward and talk about, okay, you're moving to the next best place, and to look at this as a positive change, not necessarily something that's happening to you, but a choice you're making, or for your own best interest, even if it's not one you want to make. But, okay, so how do we best replicate your lifestyle in the next place that you're going to? How do you live today in your home? Where do you spend your time? Where do you hang out? What do you sit on? What do you do? And how can we keep as much of that the same as possible so there's continuity there and familiarity? Because really, how many of us are using all the spaces in our big homes?
Mm-hmm. Right.
No. So kind of looking forward, I think, and looking forward with the right attitude is really helpful in kind of helping keep the older adults focused on, we're doing this because you're getting to the next best place.
Are there some other strategies that you've used to help minimize the stress for seniors as they are downsizing or moving?
Yes. One of the things that we abide by is to keep our work sessions short. They don't have a lot of energy, and we don't want to push them to the point of exhaustion. And so even if it's just asking them to make decisions, we keep our planning and our decision-making and our work sessions limited, and we will even say when they want to keep going, we can see they've had enough, we stop. We also say that the most important role that the older adult and the family can play is to focus on decision-making. You can always hire or find somebody to do everything else, but nobody can make their decisions for them. And so take their emotional and physical and mental energy and focus on what they want to keep and turn their back on everything else. And that kind of gets into the whole issue of their concern about, well, what's going to happen to my piano, or what's going to happen to my dining room suit. And we say, if you don't care about it enough to take with you, if it's not going to fit, we'll worry about that later. Use up your energy reserves to focus on what you're keeping and what matters to you now. And that includes things like family photos and whatever. So it's really kind of focusing and channeling the limited amount of energy they do have. The other tactic we use is to, again, keep them focused on why we're doing this. It's not to have a giant money-making opportunity when their household goods sell. We're really trying to get them to the next best place, and we try to remind them of why that's going to be good. Whether it's more social opportunities, it's safer, they're going to get help. For whatever, they're going to be closer to kids. Whatever we can find that's positive and constructive to keep them focused on, and then we also try to help manage their expectations about how long this is going to take and how much help they can get, and in particular, what their stuff is going to sell for when we go to liquidate it, because that's often a key issue with older adults. They can get really hung up on, well, I want to make sure that I get this value for this piece or whatever, and I take it upon myself to be the manager of expectations about how they're going to end up financially when they go to get rid of everything they're not keeping.
There were a couple of things that I know that I used in moving my parents multiple times that were helpful, and one was that we jointly agreed to have a curio cabinet where they got to pick special things that represented parts of their memories and identity, and that seemed to be a good exercise, and that was something we could move to the new place. And we also picked some recipients of items that, especially library books, things that they had collected over years, that made them feel better about giving those things away.
That's a really good point. A lot of people would rather give something to an appreciative taker than sell it, and particularly they don't want to throw anything out. So we make a point of saying, look, this is your stuff to do with what you will, but we can help you place it where it will be appreciated, and that brings a tremendous amount of relief usually.
And it's interesting right now, probably we are dealing a lot with Depression-era babies. And this is just kind of a throwing out there. It'll be interesting to see if there is any difference when the boomers get to that point in terms of disposing of their treasures. It'll just be sort of interesting to see how we respond in relation or in comparison with the earlier generation.
We'll get back to your show in a moment. Just a reminder, you're listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Find out more at themesh.tv and give us feedback on what you like. And now, as promised, back to your show.
Bridget, you have been talking so much about great suggestions, and I'm hearing a lot of communication. There just needs to be a whole lot of talking between the parent and the adult child. And you've talked some about that, but talk a little about what the best role is for adult children or loved ones in this whole process.
Okay. That's a good question.
And I'm sorry, that should be adult children or other loved ones in this whole process.
Okay. So much of that answer depends on the adult-child's relationship or the adult that's helping with the older adult and what the older adult's expectations and abilities are. And that can vary from, having a very collaborative relationship to wanting to just shut everybody out and not disclose anything, or even kind of keep the adult child in the loop as to how they're even doing physically. In my situation, my father allowed me to take over billing and paying his bills and making appointments and going to physician's visits with him and kind of planning for health care coming in and so forth. And I've talked with other people in the same position whose parents won't even talk to them about how they're doing or what their plans are. So I think you can start by just starting a conversation and asking, how can I help? And what role does the older adult want their helper to play? And how can you be the most help as the adult child? Where can you plug in, and what's realistic in terms of your proximity to your parents, the amount of time you have, your financial resources, etc. So that's a question that has to be navigated based on the individuals and their relationships and the situation. I do have some suggestions, though. One is to let them be in control or feel like they've got a certain amount of control, if they want to, and to don't get into a wrestling match, because all that's going to do is really bring the relationship down, and that stress from that is going to far outweigh whatever good you're trying to do. We were actually dealing with two clients, both of whom were named Lillian at the same time. It was kind of interesting. Both of whom were moving, and both had very controlling daughters. It's just ironic. But the first, Lillian, she was very proud of her daughter, who was in interior design and was going to make this floor plan for her and help her plan everything and get her moved. And the daughter kind of got her moved and left town and left all these boxes behind. And Lillian was up to her eyes, dismissed us from helping with the unpack. But the point is that the daughter conveyed that she was going to offer all this help, and then blew out of town and left her high and dry. And when I found out after the fact that Lillian wanted to hire help so her daughter could play more of a supportive role, and the daughter wouldn't let her. So there was some tension and wrestling for control there, and Lillian ended up being the one suffering from it. And then there was another combative situation with yet another Lillian, and it got heated. And I just want to say, that's really destructive for the health and emotional well-being of the older adult. So that has to really be carefully navigated, and to not, because as I said earlier, they're feeling that there's all this loss going on at the moment, and now you're wresting control away from them, and they're just sitting there a victim of their circumstances. And one thing that I think is particularly helpful is, and this can even be done from a distance, is to offer to handle the issues or the tasks that the older adult may have difficult time with, such as planning or scheduling. And these people typically haven't worked with a realtor, don't know the landscape, haven't done this for decades. So how do you even find a realtor? What questions do you ask? What's the timeline? Sometimes it helps. Two heads are better than one, and that can be a real help without it feeling like you're seizing control. Keeping track of details is significant so that somebody remembers what's been decided or what's supposed to happen by whom. And going with the older adult to meetings with movers and communities and other resources, and listening and taking notes and asking questions and representing your parents' interests. I think that's all tremendously helpful and can be done in a way that doesn't feel like you're taking over. So that's a real chunk of help that I think can be extended. Another one is to just be empathetic and listen, because sometimes they know it's happening despite them not wanting it to the mood, I'm saying. But if they just want to be heard, and so listen, and to try to, provide some comforting, empathetic words, and don't necessarily feel like you have to fix everything, but just to hear them out, and offer to bring in other help, because sometimes they're not even aware that there is help. And if the situation warrants it and the family can afford it, or needs it because the adult child doesn't live nearby to help, find those resources. And sometimes I've seen the adult child actually pay for them because the cost is insignificant compared to the help that it provides and relieves the stress in the situation.
Bridget, could you give us some examples of that kind of help or resources that we could find in most communities?
Yes. So one big resource is the National Association of Senior Move Managers, or NASM, NASMM.org. And NASM is an organization that's been around for over 20 years, and it's made up of really big companies and really small companies, and all of whom really care about helping older adults in transition, and even helping older adults who choose to stay in place and live in their homes. But the people in NASM, the businesses, are really all about all that I just mentioned, listening to the needs of the older adult and helping make the transition to be as minimally stressful as possible, and being the single point of contact to connect all those resources and to coordinate, facilitate, and plan, and really just kind of look out for the best interests of the older adult and their families. So that's a key resource, and that's nasm.org on the web. People can also contact their local offices of aging and their senior service organizations and find out, what services are out in the community. Perhaps they qualify for because of financial reasons. What's out there, that even just resources to come out and assess situations, and where's the next best place for this individual? Where should they go? Are they, should they go directly to personal care, or is assisted living okay? They'll do some assessment. So it varies by locale, but that's a good resource to tap.
Right.
Continuing care retirement communities are also a good resource, again, to understand what they offer and their availability, which is key these days because beds are limited and cottages are limited. But what do they have, and what do they suggest, and what's it cost, and what are the options? I think information gathering is always good, even if there's no real decision to go there. You can at least know what your options are. And then oftentimes there are local seminars that are put on by communities and entities within the organization, like ACAP, that share information for both the older adult and their adult children.
Right. Bridget, this has been wonderful information the whole time you've been talking. Beth and I have been sitting here nodding our heads, yes. In that we have moved our parents. We know what this is like and how stressful it can be for everyone. Thank you so much for what you do and for this great information that you have shared, both your personal as well as your professional insight. And Beth, thank you for being part of this conversation. And truly, thank you all for listening to the caregiver community. Bridget, Beth, and I hope you have learned something you didn't know that will help you be a more effective support and advocate for your aging parents. This program is part of the MESH network of online shows and podcasts. You may learn more about the MESH and check out other great programs that they offer for free at www.themesh.tv. That's www.themesh.tv. On that site, you may also send us a question or recommendation for future show topics using the Contact Us button. We also encourage you to find us on Apple iTunes, where you may subscribe to our show to make sure you receive all future episodes automatically of our podcasts. You'll find a link to the MESH website on our ACAP Community website also. For more information about ACAP Community, please visit our website, www.acapcommunity.org, and that's ACAP, like Adult Children of Aging Parents, www.acapcommunity.org, or call us toll-free at 877-599-ACAP, that's 877-599-2227, or email us at info@acapcommunity.org. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, listeners.
You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.